So welcome all of you to the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston's Global Connections program. My name is Marianne Maldonado, and my guest today is the President and CEO of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, the USGLC. The USGLC is a coalition of over 500 businesses and NGOs that advocates for strong U.S. global leadership through development and diplomacy. And I'm sure you'd agree that that's something we strongly need right now. The coalition also has a network nationwide of advocates and a bipartisan advisory council chaired by General Colin Powell. I'm pleased to represent the council as part of the Texas Advisory Council, and a special thanks to the Southwest Outreach Director, Troy Williams. Liz, thank you for joining us today.
So glad to be here. Thanks, Marianne.
Well, many of our viewers understand that investing in development and diplomacy makes sense and that it helps keep America safe and strengthens our economy. Can you explain the importance of can you explain the importance of the U.S. having strength in all three of the main components of global leadership, diplomacy, development, and defense?
Absolutely. Well, first, let me just thank you, Marianne. I'm so pleased to join the Houston World Affairs Council. I'm so glad that you're part of the USGLC, so thank you all. And, let me kind of zoom out to give maybe given the state of the world and give a little bit of a perspective of that really important question. It's hard to believe, but USGLC is celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, which means I've been doing this a long time. But I've also been thinking about your question for a long time, because it's so important about how our development diplomacy impacts our security, our economics, and our values, particularly for Texas. And it's a pretty powerful story. If I could just step back, as I said a minute, because I've been thinking a lot about where the world was in 1995 when I kicked this off with some other friends. And if you think about, especially the World Affairs Council, you all are steeped in history. Think about where the world was 25 years ago. It was the end of the Cold War, and our fellow citizens, we had some that said, we won. We don't need to be engaged in the world. And we didn't heed our call of what happened in World War I, where we did disengage, and it was not a good time. There were a bunch of folks who thought we don't need to be engaged. We could limit our investments in our toolkit of development and diplomacy. And I remember lawmakers bragging that they didn't own a passport, like as a badge of honor. So that's when we formed. And so in answer to your question, 25 years later, we're really proud to be engaged in states like Texas all over the country, as you said in my introduction, and have people like yourself and Henry Cisneros and Matt Rooney and Charles Foster and Representative Jean Green, Democrats, Republicans, and business leaders and nonprofit leaders. And we host these conversations to ask that exact question. So the why is kind of four reasons that let me go through. And the first one's pretty dramatic. It's why we're virtual. It's our health security. So I always try to explain it that it's this old adage that we all used to joke about, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And here we are, what happens in a faraway village that no one probably can find on a map when it comes to a deadly virus, it doesn't stay in that small away village. Literally, it takes, now we all know, 36 hours to spread a deadly disease. The CDC has said that there's 70% of the world's health systems are not capable of predicting, preventing, or responding to a deadly disease. So if we want to protect our health security, we better prevent in the world. So that's number one, is just our health. Second is security. The instability of the world is on a rise. Terrorism is on a rise. I saw a statistic the other day that violent attacks have increased by 40% in sub-Saharan Africa by Boko Haram since the pandemic began compared to last year. So I would say security is number two, because our development and diplomacy tools are critical to helping fight security. The third is, I'll use the old language from campaign life, it's the economy, stupid. you know, Texas hosts two of the most heavily trafficked business hubs in the world. Houston, you and I were just talking, is one of them. You know, you have the largest. Your state hosts the largest exports in the United States. 3 million jobs in Texas are connected to international trade, which is extraordinary. I think last year, before COVID, $315 billion of goods went to foreign markets. And I would argue that right now we're really concerned because one of the things we're watching is that US exports to the developing world, again, where these tools are so important, are down by 50%. One of your most important markets in Texas is Mexico. Those markets are now down by 38%. And who's filling them? We got competition. China is out there, and we can talk about that. So that's the third piece of the puzzle, is that I think our economy, these tools are really important in that. And the final piece of the puzzle to your question is, the people of Texas, the good people of Texas, we care about just from a humanitarian point of view. One of the greatest things that I thought happened 2 weeks ago is the Nobel Peace Prize was given to the World Food Program for combating hunger in the world. And what did they do? They went out there and said that if the world continues the way it is, we could see a doubling of the number of people who could see starvation in the world. And they got pulled out as the Nobel Peace Prize because of their work on combating hunger, not just for their work, but also from stopping food from being used as a tool to combat and being used in war and conflict. And I think those are the types of things that we as Americans, and I think you as Texans, can be really proud at. So I think those are some of the key reasons why.
So tell us a little bit more about the USGLC, kind of what you do, how you do it, who you do it with.
That's a great question. We're so proud of, the Washington Post once called us the Strange Bedfellow Coalition. Some people may say, we embrace it. We're a big tent coalition of businesses and faith leaders and veterans and mayors and Democrats, Republicans, independents, and we love it. We are 500 businesses and NGOs, everything from Walmart to World Vision and CARE to Caterpillar, and lots of folks and icons that you would know. And as you said, we have every former living Secretary of State on our advisory committee, and over 200 retired 3- and 4-star generals and admirals. And we live in every state, and we're real active in Purple America. And one of the things, what do? Is we do two basic things. One is I mentioned earlier, we were founded during that time when the world was going inward, and we went out there and said, we're going to protect the resources for State Department and USAID and Peace Corps, because we think those are resources that are really important to what I just was talking about before. The other thing we do is we create a platform, a sought after and powerful platform around the country for policymakers to talk with their constituents about why leading globally matters locally, just for the reasons we were just talking about, with their constituents. And I had to tell you, Marianne, I thought in this moment when everything went virtual, would members of Congress still want to do it? We have been more members want to talk to their constituents right now, and we're hosting members of Congress constantly virtually because they want to connect to their constituents, particularly in a global pandemic, about these issues.
So we're going to invite everyone to submit their questions. You can do that through the Q&A section, and we'll make sure we weave those into the conversation. But maybe you could tell us a little bit, you've touched on the Texas component of this, and how does the coalition operate here in Texas as it pertains to international affairs, international trade and relations?
So you mentioned my colleague, my wonderful colleague, Troy Williams. Give a shout out to him again. And he is our director in the Texas, the Southwest area region. And we have this wonderful Texas Advisory Committee, which you are a member of. And thank you for that, as well as so many others. You can find it on our website, www.usglc.org. And what we try to do is, with anybody who wants to be involved, is to host roundtable conversations, partner with everybody. As I said, we're a big tent organization to have conversations, not dissimilar to this, but ultimately to ask you to do a couple things: to engage with policymakers and let them know that we support America's engagement in the world. We support what's called the international affairs budget. That's the element of our federal budget. It's about 1% of the budget that supports the State Department. I have this strange thing keeps popping up on my computer, and that we want to make sure that there are resources for these programs. We meet with candidates running for office, Democrats and Republicans, because even before they get into the halls of Congress, the halls of the Senate, we want to educate them about these programs. So we invite citizens in the state of Texas to join us in those meetings. So those are the kinds of programs we host.
And I want to get back to the programs, but I want to step back a little bit. And with so many politicians, regular Americans, both Democrat and Republican, seeming to be comfortable with the U.S. stepping back from a leadership role in the world, how are you convincing us that U.S. leadership is still vital?
Well, I think it couldn't be more important right now that in a global pandemic, that there has to be a global response. We could get everything right. And as long as there is a global pandemic anywhere, then Americans are at risk. And Texas, like every other state in our union, has been terribly impacted by this disease, both health as well as loss of jobs. So one of the things, Marianne, we've been doing is we've been looking at the response coming out of Congress that the White House and Congress are responding to. There has been, as you've seen, trillions of dollars that have been rightfully responded to take care of the health and economic response to the COVID virus. And on the international side, all we have responded to is the same that we did for Ebola to 3 countries. And we believe there needs to be the right response, the right appropriate response, because as I said before, if we don't make sure that there's health systems that are weak and fragile around the world, though the virus is just going to come back right back to our shores. As soon as we get it right here, it's going to come right back to our shores. So we're looking at strategic, smart, effective investments overseas that will then make sure that we protect our health and economic security here. So that's one of the things that we're doing to make sure that we're protecting the health and security of Americans back home, and working with Congress in a bipartisan way to make sure we respond.
And it really helps reassure us as Americans that spending money on diplomacy in the long run, it more than pays for itself. I mean, it's important that we do this. It's important that we help others, but in turn, it helps ourselves. The coalition has always been a purposefully bipartisan organization and effort. And in the recent years of increasing partisan division, how hard has it been to get both Republicans and Democrats together to support a policy or legislative initiative?
It's fascinating when there was an effort there's been efforts over the last several years to cut massive resources from this international affairs budget. This is a 1% of the budget. Overwhelming bipartisan rejection of that from everybody from the Freedom Caucus, which is the furthest right in the Congress to the Progressive Caucus, which is the furthest left. Over the last 4 years, that group of members of Congress have pushed back against $54 billion of proposed cuts from the administration. At the same time, we have worked with the administration in a bipartisan way, also on Capitol Hill, on multiple pieces of legislation to promote really important policy agendas, such as an effort that Ivanka Trump led called the Women Development and Global Prosperity Act that promotes women economic empowerment throughout the world, on an effort to promote development finance corporation, it's called, to advance and actually confront China around the world with a more proactive development finance tool. And what I am amazed is when nothing else, Democrats and Republicans can't agree on anything, one area that they actually agree on is on development and diplomacy. And as I told you, I've been doing this for 35 years and being in Washington. And it's remarkable to see where the energy is. This is a place that Democrats and Republicans get really excited to work together on. And I'm in meetings and I see two members that are screaming at each other on the floor on some other issue, but this is an area where they get very excited to work together on.
That's extremely encouraging. Tell us a little bit about some of the programs that you currently have, and then maybe some of the great programming that you're planning for the future.
So, one of the programs that we had to stop doing, which is disappointing, is travel. So we haven't been able to do two kinds of travel. One is obviously get to come to places like Houston and visit you. And in the past, we've done, my favorite thing was always to come and visit communities where we get to have these amazing conversations. And although I love just seeing Marianne, but I love to see everybody else's faces too, where we really can engage with people and have these town hall conversations, including with elected officials, and really talk about why leading globally matters, not just from my voice, but from everybody's voices. And so I miss that. The other kind of program that we have done is going overseas and taking policymakers overseas to actually see programs. I still remember a member of Congress, it was a freshman member of Congress that I took, who had run actually very opposed to development programs and diplomacy. He was a radio talk show host, and he was pretty out there against these programs from a very rural area, and through a board member of ours agreed to come with me. And we went to a place called Eldoret, Kenya, which I don't know, Marianne, if you've ever been, but it's where a lot of the great runners of Kenya come from. And the first 3 days of the trip, he was very quiet and made me very nervous about what in the world did he think of this trip, till we got to this very rural farm. And we got to the farm and we met a woman, Irene, and Irene, through an interpreter, told us how she was barely able to make ends meet. She had one cow who was dying until a US aid program knocked on her door. It was called Feed the Future, was the name of the program. And the program taught her how to feed her farm, how to grow yield-eating seeds. And now she has 5 cows. She can send her children, instead of staying home, to school. She has taught all the other women in the village the same toolkit. She no longer gets it. She didn't get a handout. She got a hand up. And this congressman lit up. He said, first of all, it's farming. I know that. He now speaks all over the country for us. He's a more senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He's a Freedom Caucus member. He's a very conservative member, and he's fantastic. I miss that program. So those are two I miss. The one that we're doing that I am most excited about is a new program called the Next Gen program. Because as you and I both know, the future is, you're younger than me, but the future is not you and me. The future is the next generation. So we are engaging with a pilot program that we just got a little funding for, very little funding, but we are engaging, trying to engage 25 to 35-year-olds who are just launching their careers. And we're getting, in each of the states that we've got people applying, 2 from each state, an online curriculum, leadership track that we will then engage them in our advisory committees. And we even got General Jim Mattis, who gave the recommendation for one of our young people. And I think that is the future.
I was going to ask you about that program. We have many educators and students with us today. One student asks a question that I'm going to reserve for the end because I know that we will definitely cover it. Tell me a little bit about how the coalition is responding to the COVID pandemic.
Well, as I said earlier, this has been something that has really concerned me. So as I mentioned earlier, the biggest concern I think is twofold. Is first of all, we all have seen that COVID has spotlighted that the accelerated the inequities here in our own country, but also the most vulnerable. And so we have been trying to show the spotlight on the concerns we have in the developing world. But the real concern that we have is if we don't invest in the developing world, again, it's going to come back to our shores. We cannot forget the fact that these are weak and fragile health systems, that if we don't address the cost of inaction for us is profound. So we're trying to make sure that the next COVID supplemental will include $20 billion very specifically to very effective programs like the World Food Program that just got the Nobel Peace Prize, like Gavi, which is the platform for vaccine distribution, like the Global Fund, which is an international platform that helps address weak and fragile health systems, and there are others, and people who are terribly deprived of other vaccines that we had been stopping, like malaria and HIV/AIDS. And if we do that right effectively, it will have enormous impact on our own health and economic security. So this is not only because it's the right thing to do, but frankly, this is the smart thing to do, that if we don't, the cost of inaction is only going to cost us more down the line.
Absolutely.
So that's what we are focused on. It's a bigger debate. It's a much bigger debate that, they're fighting over bigger things. The members of Congress agree, let's get this part done.
You mentioned 3 program agencies. We have a question from Walter, who runs a medical needs company that distributes equipment in developing world. In addition to who you mentioned, how can the healthcare aid be provided where it's most needed by the people and also advance our nation's interests?
Well, it's critical, Walter, that the process that these healthcare groups the health needs get out to the people. One of the biggest concerns that we are seeing is that there's been a secondary and tertiary impact of COVID because obviously it shut down all kinds of things. The Gates Foundation put out something called their Gatekeeper Report. They did it every year during the UN General Assembly. And for the past several years, it's been this wonderful announcement of success. And for the first time this year, it was a really upsetting report by their own account. In 25 weeks, we saw 25 years of progress decline when it comes to vaccines of children. So Walter has a program that it sounds like is trying to deliver medical equipment and medical supplies that I don't know the specifics of, but we've had other organizations that have talked to me that are having had initially a very hard time just literally getting things out the door because of the pandemic. Now it's getting better and people are getting an easier time figuring out ways to do it. But it was very, very, very hard initially of having the personnel to safely get it out. And we saw people who literally weren't coming in to get vaccinated. And so we are fearing, some real declines of years of America leadership in preventable diseases. And I think we're going to, at the end of this, in addition to the impact of COVID, again, see diminish and decline around preventable diseases that America's leadership has been extraordinary.
You bring in so many different individuals from both sides of the aisle, and I understand that on the horizon, you are going to be honoring Tony Fauci. Tell us a little bit about that honor.
So every year we have this wonderful in-person event that we celebrate as what we call our annual tribute dinner. So this year we're doing it a little differently. It is, as I said, our 25th. I see you have your 50th year celebration. We have our 25th, so we're a little behind you, but we're quite excited about it. And it happens to fall, Marianne, on World AIDS Day. So it's December 1, and we're going to do a 25th virtual celebration. And we are thrilled to honor actually 3 very special people, one of which is, of course, as you said, Dr. Tony Fauci with a Lifetime Achievement Award. We have some pretty special people that will be part of that celebration, a few celebrities that you'll be excited to see that have been very involved in the fight against HIV/AIDS, as well as David Beasley, who's the executive director of the World Food Program, again, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and Henrietta Fore, who leads UNICEF, who has played a transformational role in the fight to make sure that our children around the world are protected. So it's a magnificent evening of celebration. We have many former secretaries of state that are going to be involved, members of Congress. It's going to be a 1-hour program online. And we're really excited and hope people will tune in. I think it's going to be 8 o'clock East Coast time, but stay tuned to make sure that you can watch it from anywhere from your home.
That's great. One of our students asked, how can individuals engage with policymakers and the U.S. Global Coalition?
So it's real easy to start with. Sign up at www.usglc.org and get on our email list, and we will plug you in, and then Troy will follow up with you.
Well, I have enjoyed being on the Texas Advisory Council. You do such an important work and communication to our community and across the U.S. Any final comments, Liz?
Well, it's just thrilling to be able to partner with you. America needs to lead in the world. We need to be at the table because, frankly, Marianne, as you know, if we're not there, somebody else will fill the void, and that is not good for our security. That's not good for our economic interests. And we're really proud as our values to be a partner in the world with others to make sure that we protect our security, our health. And as I said earlier, if anything didn't give us a wake-up call, right now, looking at each other, not that I don't like doing this by virtual, but it's a lot more fun to do it in person. So everybody should stay healthy and be well, but I'll look forward to coming to Houston in person.
We will look forward to having you and hosting a great number of people, hopefully in person, very safely when it's good to do so. I'm so glad you joined us, Liz. Thank you so much. I have learned so much about the coalition. I'm so pleased to have had you on our Global Connections program. I know our community will check into your website and find out more information. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Next Friday at lunch, please join me for our Global Connections program with our great friend, Galen Cobb of Halliburton. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Liz. Have a great afternoon and a great weekend, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.